Hello everyone, my name is Zara Khan. My roll number is 225062 and my topic is finite state automator, transition diagram, transition table, DFA and NDFA and conversion from NDFA to DFA. So let us begin. First we will see finite state automator. Introduction. So, finite automator are abstract machines used to recognize patterns in input sequences, forming the basis for understanding regular languages in computer science. So, they consist of states, transitions, and input symbols, processing each symbol step by step. Now, a finite state automation can be represented by 5 tuples. So, the 5 tuples are capital Q, sigma, delta, Q naught and F. Now, let us see each tuple one by one. So, the first is capital Q, which is a finite non-empty set of states. Second is sigma, which is a finite non-empty set of input called input alphabets. Then next is delta. Delta is a function which maps q multiplied by sigma, into q. And this delta is called a transition function. Now the fourth is q naught. Q naught is a designated starting state called the initial state. So q naught is the initial state and f is a set of states indicating successful input processing or final state. So q naught is the initial state and f is the final state. Now let us come to the transition diagram. So a transition diagram is a finite direct labeled graph associated with the vertices of the graph corresponding to the state of finite automator. So this is the diagram of transition. So this q naught is the initial state over here and q2 is the final state. So we get to know that where double lines, these double circles are made, this is the final state and the single one is the initial state. In between q naught and q2 is the state which is called intermediate state, and where 1 and 0 are the input symbols. Now the transition table. Transition table is made from this diagram itself. So this transition diagram, when it is represented in tabular form, this is called a transition table. Transition table. It is basically a tabular representation of transition function that takes two arguments, a state and a symbol. So it takes two arguments, a state as well as a symbol, and this is a tabular representation of this diagram and this transition, and returns a value the next state. So it returns the value which is the next state. Over here q naught, it is giving a value q1 which is the next state. This is the transition diagram, and for this the table will be state and input. Input will have two values 0 and 1. So when state is q naught, then the input for 0 is q naught. When the state is q naught, the input for 0 is q naught only. Now when the state is q naught, the input for 1 is q1. When this q naught has input symbol 1, then it has q1. Then over here we see q1 state for input 0 is q naught. See, q1 state for input 0. For this 0 input, it has q naught. Similarly, q1 for 1 input, it has q1 only. So in the table, q1 is written. Now let us come to the next topic, which is types of finite state automation. There are two types. One is DFA, then second one is NDFA. So let us see the first one, which is, the full form is deterministic finite state automation. The finite state automation is called deterministic finite state if a machine read and input string one symbol at a time. So if it read any input string as one symbol at a time, then this is called DFA. DFA does not allow any null transition, means every state must have a transition defined for every input symbol. So there is no such possible condition where null transition can be occur. So there will always be a transition defined on every input symbol which is there. For example, this is the transition diagram for DFA. Now over here we see that Q naught, when it gets the input 0, it has Q naught only, and then when it gets the input value 1, it becomes Q1 state, and this Q1 state, when gets value 1, it becomes itself Q1 state, and then if it gets the value 0, it comes to the final state which is Q2, and it, since we get to know that it has double circles around it, so this is the final state. And since it has double circles, then we say that this is the final state Q2, and if Q2 receives a 0 symbol, then it comes to itself. So this is the transition diagram for DFA. Now we will see the second type of finite state automation, which is called NDFA. The full form is non-deterministic finite state automation. So the finite state automation is called NDFA if for any particular input symbol the machine can move to any combination of state. So over here, for any particular symbol the machine can move to any combinations of state, but in the previous one it will read one symbol at a time. Now let us see the transition diagram for this. This is the transition diagram for NDFA, where Q naught is there, and when Q naught gets the input as 0, it brings to itself, and if as 1, then also it brings to itself, and when the input variable is 1, so Q naught changes from Q naught to Q1. Over here, any input label can be labeled with one or more states. So Q naught has the label Q0, it will be labeled to Q naught, and similarly it has another label Q1. Q1 is also labeling it to the state Q naught, and it is labeling to another state also. When Q naught is getting the input label as 1, it is getting to another state which is Q1, and now when Q1 is also getting input label 1, it is giving more than one state which is Q1, and also when it receives this one input, then it is giving another state which is Q2. Now Q2 also we see that it receives two input states, two input variables 0 and 1, and when it gets 0, it is getting its states Q2, and also if it is getting 1, it is getting its states Q1, and also if this is getting Q1 input, it is giving another state, it is giving Q2 and one more other state which is Q3, and Q3 on getting 1 is giving itself Q3, and similarly this 0 input variable 0 also is giving Q3. Now the next thing will be to convert the NDFA into DFA. And one more thing, in this DFA there is no null transition allowed. That means there will be any there must be any transition taking place. It cannot be denied for any input. So if there is any input given, there will be a transition. There is no possible region where there is no transition taking place. Now we will convert this NDFA into DFA thing. So for example, we will take this diagram, and first from this transition diagram we will draw the transition table. So in this transition diagram, Q naught, when it gets the input as 0, it is giving Q naught, and then when it is getting Q naught is getting over here, it should be 1. When it is getting 1, it is giving q1. Then when this q1 is getting 0 or 1, then it is getting the state q1. And also another state, which is when it is getting 0, it is giving another state which is the final state called q2. And q2, the final state, when it gets 0 or 1 input, then it is giving q2. And also when it gets the 1 input, it is giving q1 state also, as well as q2 and q1 states. So for this diagram, if we need to draw the transition table, so how will we make it? So first we will write the state and input, then input can be 0 or 1. So first state, first q1, q2 and q3, q0, q1 and q2 we will see. So for q0, when the input is 0, we are getting q0. When the input 0, we are getting q0. Then now when the input is 1, if for q0 the input is 1, we are getting q1 state. So we will write q1. So next is q1. q1, when it gets 0, it is getting q1. The input is 0, it is giving q1. Also we see when the input is 0, it is getting q2 also. So we will write q1 comma q2. Now when the input is 1, for q1, we are getting q1. For the input 1, we are getting q1 only, because this arrow is pointing towards q1 only. Now next is q2. So for this final state, we see that 0 or 1, whether both of the inputs, we are getting q2. So q2 will be in both. And now q1, why? Because this q2, it is also getting another state which is at one input, q1 state. So we will write it q1 comma q2. So this is the transition table of this NDFA problem. Okay, now we will see the transition table for DFA. So for DFA, again we will write the state and the input. Input will be 0 or 1. Now we will calculate for this q0, q1 and q1 comma q2. So for first q0, for input 0. So over here we see for q0 input 0, we are getting q0. So in the table we will write q0. Similarly for 1, input 1, we see over here that we are getting q1. So we will write q1. Now for q1 state we will check. For q1 state, when input is 0, we are getting 2, q1 as well as q2, both states. So we will write both q1 comma q2. Now for input 1 we will check. For input 1, if we check, then we get only one state which is q1. So we will write over here q1. Now next is q1 comma q2. So for q1 comma q2, we see we are getting, for q1 comma q2, we are getting q1 and q1 comma q2 only. Because when q1 comma q2 is state is there and input is 0, so from q1 we are getting q2, from q2 we are getting q2, and from q1 we are getting q1 also. So q1 and q2 both are there for 0. Similarly for 1 also we are getting q1, as well as for q2 also we are getting q2 and q1 also. So it will be q1 comma q2 for both input 0 and input 1. Now the transition diagram for this DFA, it will become this. So this is the transition diagram. By this table, with the help of this table, we can draw it. So it is like q0 over here, q0, and it gets input 0, so it getting q0. So when the input is 0, it is getting q0. Now let's check for q1. When it gets input 1, when the input is 1, it is getting q1. Now for q1, when the input is 1, it is getting q1. When the input is 0, it is getting q1 q2. And for q1 q2, it is the opposite case, like q1 q2 is getting on 0 also, it is getting q1 comma q2, and on 1 also it is getting the state q1 comma q2. So this was the conversion of NDFA problem to DFA. So that is our final conversion. Thank you.